Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So today is going to be my ranking my entire eyeshadow palette collection video. So I have 37 palettes total in my collection, and today I'm just going to be ranking all of them. I did do a ranking my top 10 eyeshadow palette video. That was about a month ago, I believe. So I will be sure to link that down below if you would like to go check that out. Since then, my top 10 has switched around a little bit, so if you're interested to see that, then make sure you keep on watching. This is going to be a bit of a longer video since I do have 37 palettes, so be sure to settle in, grab a snack, and we will just get started. So starting at the bottom with number 37, we have this I Heart Revolution Donut palette in Raspberry Icing. So this is what this one looks like on the inside. It's a really cute color story, obviously very monochromatic, but the shades in here just do not perform good. I have only tried these few matte shades right here, but they just do not show up on my lids, and I don't know what I am doing wrong, if I'm doing anything wrong, or if it's just the formula of this. I still need to test out the shimmers, but since trying the mattes and having them not work, I've been a little discouraged with this palette, so I haven't really wanted to reach for it at all. But yeah, that is the reason this one is number 37. Otherwise, it's a pretty cute palette. I really like the packaging, it's super cute, but yeah, it just does not perform well, so that is why it is number 37. Next up, we have my Maybelline The Nudes palette. So this is the oldest palette in my collection, so it's just one that I don't really reach for all that often anymore. It still creates a nice cool toned look, and that's the reason I like to keep it around, because I don't have that many cool tones in my collection. And I specifically love like this little quad right here of the grays and the black. I think they still perform fairly good. And yeah, I still want to keep it around. I'm thinking maybe by the end of the year I'll declutter it, but who knows. And alright, the next palette we have is my Revolution Reloaded Basic Mattes palette. And this is what this one looks like. So obviously this is an all matte palette, and that's the main reason it's ranked so low. It just doesn't really inspire me as much as some of my other palettes do. And I do love matte shadows, but I would prefer to have a mix of shimmer and mattes in my palettes. It does perform really nicely, so if you are someone who loves all matte palettes, this one is really good. It's just not my personal preference for a palette, so that is why it is ranked at number 35. Alright, number 34 goes to my e.l.f. Little Black Beauty book. So here is what this one looks like on the inside. As you can see, I've hit a few pans in this palette, but the reason this one is ranked as low as it is because there are 48 shades in here, and a lot of them are just different tones of shimmery browns. And that just doesn't really excite me. It kind of overwhelms me a little bit with having this many shades, but the reason I like to keep it is because I really like these greens and blues in here, and then like a couple of these other little select shades in here I think are really nice as well. So that's kind of the reason I like to keep this palette. And yeah, it's not one I reach for often, but I still do use it occasionally. And I would like to see some more pans in here before I decide to declutter it. Alright, next at number 33 we have my Essence Salute Paris palette. And this one is super cute, and I really expected to like this palette, but the shades in here were pretty underwhelming. These two look basically identical. This one doesn't show up at all on the eye. These three mattes right here do create nice soft looks, and for an everyday palette it is nice. And then the shimmers in here are very good. They're very beautiful. They're kind of the standout in this palette, and one of the main reasons I want to keep it, because I just really like the shimmers in here. And it is a nice, soft, everyday palette. It's just not one that I reach for over some of the other ones in my collection. Next up, number 32 is my Profusion Mixed Metals Peach palette. So this is one that I have had for quite a while now, and it's also one that I just kind of tend to forget about. It's a really nice palette. It performs well. I always like the looks that I create when I use it. It's just one that I just forget to use sometimes, and that's just personal error on my part, but that is why it is ranked lower than some of the other palettes in my collection. Doesn't mean I want to get rid of it. I still really like having it in my collection, but it's just lower on my list. Alright, next up, this one kind of pains me with how low it is because I love Pac-Man, but this is the Wet n Wild Game Over palette. If I was just going based off packaging, this one would rank a lot higher because I think it's so cute to have the Pac-Man game on the packaging. But the reason this one is so low is just because of the color story. These are not colors that I reach for every day. They're super cute colors. It's a nice little compact rainbow palette, but it's just personally not what I use. I love that Wet n Wild did this color story for Pac-Man. I think it fits so well with the theme of the palette. I would not change the color story, but just personal preference for everyday use. It's not something that I use on an everyday basis. Alright, moving on to number 30. This is another Wet n Wild palette. This is the Walking on Eggshells quad. And the reason this one is lower is because I just don't use quads all that often. It's really nice for creating a simple everyday look, super easy, just pull it out, put it on the eyes and go. So for that, I really do like this palette, but I am someone who likes to kind of sit down and do my makeup and play with different shadows, and that's just not what this palette gives me. Alright, number 29. This is the Covergirl True Naked Peach Punch palette. This one is a bit newer in my collection. I just got it for Christmas this past year in 2020. This is a super cute palette. I really do like the color story of it, but there are just other palettes in my collection I like more, is just what it comes down to, really. The performance of these shades are pretty good, especially for a drugstore palette. I really like this shade right here. I think it has some beautiful dimension to it, and this is one that you kind of have to see in person to really get the full effect of the palette, because looking at it online, I was like, oh yeah, that's cute, but getting it in person, you can really see like the full dimension of some of the shades, and it made me like this palette a lot more. So yeah, there are just palettes that I prefer more, so that is why this one is a little bit lower. Next up, we have another Wet n Wild palette. This is my Wet n Wild Not a Basic Peach palette. This is one of their 10 pans, which I do really enjoy in general. But for some reason, I just tend to neglect this one, even though it has a super cute color story. I especially really love this matte orange shade. Overall, this isn't a palette that I really remember to reach for. I have created some super pretty looks that I just really love. Each time I reach into this palette, I get a really nice look. It's just one I need to kind of remember to use. So number 27, this is another Wet n Wild palette. This is the Wet n Wild Au Naturel. This, I'm pretty sure, is discontinued, but I really do enjoy it specifically for this shade right here. This is one of my absolute favorite shades in my entire collection. So if we were just basing it off of the shades, this would definitely be close to the top. But as a whole palette, this isn't one that I use all the shades in. I really only use the 4 shades I have pan in here. And I just really felt like because of that I couldn't rank this any higher. There's nothing wrong with the other shades, it's just personal preference, really. It's what it comes down to, and there are just palettes in my collection that I want to use more. Moving on to number 26, we have the Colourpop Garden Variety palette. So first off, the packaging of this, I absolutely adore it. I think it is so beautiful. Colourpop always kills it with their packaging. And then this is what it looks like on the inside. So it's a really cute color story, especially for spring. It's just the quality of these shades isn't as good as some other Colourpop palettes that I have in my collection. I feel like the shimmers in here are kind of on the more sheer side, but this is all obviously just personal preference for me, and that is why it is ranked a little bit lower. Next up, with palette number 25, we have the Rude Cosmetics Roaring 20s palette. This is the Neons one. So I love the 1920s. I love the whole theme of this, but the color story, I'm sure you all can guess, is not something I would wear every day. It's really cute, but it's just so bright and colorful that I just couldn't really rank it much higher than this. I do really enjoy the theme of this palette. I think looking at this palette, it is so stunning. It's just not an everyday palette for me, and that is why it is ranked at number 25. Alright, the next palette up is my I Heart Revolution Beauty and the Beast palette. And this one is coming in at number 24. So here is what this one looks like on the inside. It's a very big palette. It's kind of hard to fit. I like this palette. Using it in my eyeshadow roulette project made me like it more than I originally did. The formula of this is okay. It's not really a standout formula. There are some shades that perform really nicely and other ones that don't work as well. The color story is a little bit all over the place in my opinion, which on the one hand I do like because it means I can create a variety of looks, but sometimes I get a little stuck when looking at it. But I have created some really beautiful looks that I do really love out of this palette, so that is why it has moved up in my rankings, but it's still only at 24. And then next at 23, we have another I Heart Revolution Disney palette. This is the Cinderella one. And the reason this one is lower is just because of the color story and a little bit of the formula, like I was saying with the Belle one. It's just not the best quality wise, but there are some shades in here that do work really nicely. So next up we have my Ulta Slytherin palette. So this one, well, first off, this packaging, absolutely adore it. And then here is the color story inside of it. I think this is a really cute color story. I love the grungier tones in here. It's just like a lot of the other palettes in my collection. It's not something I wear on an everyday basis. I have created some really cute everyday looks with some of these more neutral shades up here, but the greens are not really ones that I use every day, but I still like to have them in my collection. I know I've been saying that a lot with these palettes aren't ones that I use every day, but that doesn't mean I don't like to play with them for my YouTube channel or for my Instagram or just like around the house. These just aren't palettes that I typically would wear out to either work or to school or something. So while I do have some shades that I don't use for the everyday, I am still happy to have them in my collection, and this is one of those palettes. Next up we have my Maybelline Lemonade Craze palette. So this one has a really cute color story. I especially think it is going to be one I'm going to get a lot of use out of over the summer. I really do like the colors in here. It is one that I kind of overlook a little bit in my collection, but I have gotten some good use out of it, and having it in different projects has made me reach for it a little bit more and make me realize that it is a palette that I do enjoy having in my collection. Alright, top 20, starting out with the Hufflepuff palette from Ulta Beauty. So here is what this one looks like on the inside. This one has a really cute color story. I specifically love Galleon, Lumos, and some of these more gold shades over here too. The reason this one is a little bit lower, only at 20, is because This color story in my mind just isn't super cohesive. I wish there was either a darker brown or darker orange or something so that I could deepen up Galleon. Earth works, but with it being a darker purple shade, I get a little worried about making it look muddied, but if you're careful using these shades, it does look good. And I have created some looks that I really do enjoy with this palette, and there are those few shades in here that I really love having in my collection. So that is why it is at number 20. So moving on to another Harry Potter palette. This is the Ulta Beauty and Gryffindor palette. So this one is number 19. This one obviously has a lot more cohesive color story than the previous one, and I really do like the shades in here. I specifically like this Mandrake shade. The reason it is a little bit lower is because I feel like this is a little bit more on the monochromatic side, and reaching in here, there's only so many looks that you can do with this palette, whereas some of my other palettes have a bigger variety of shades that allows a bigger variety of looks, and this just isn't what this palette is. I have created some really nice looks with this palette. That's not to say that I can't create different looks with this palette. It just doesn't have as much variety as some of the other palettes in my collection. But I do still really enjoy this palette. I enjoy the theme of it. I am a huge Harry Potter fan, and I am a Gryffindor according to the Pottermore quiz, so for that reason this does hold a special place in my heart, and I do really enjoy it. It just ranks lower than some other palettes in my collection. Next up we have my BH Cosmetics Nuevo Neutrals palette, and this one, the packaging actually broke on this, so that's kind of one of the reasons this is ranked lower and only at number 18, just because ever since it broke, I've been kind of not wanting to reach for it because I find it kind of annoying. I have to put a rubber band around it, and I know that's kind of just a little bit lazy, but I would like my palettes to stay together preferably. But I do really enjoy the color story of this palette. I think it is kind of a neutral lover's dream. You've got your more cool purpley tones, some warm tones, some more basic neutrals, and I do think it has a nice variety in that sense. So I do really enjoy it. It's just not one I tend to reach for anymore. So next up at number 17 is my Tartelette Toasted palette. So here is what this one looks like on the inside. Sorry for the very reflective packaging. I will try not to blind you all. So this one is only at number 17 because you have to want to wear warm tones in order to reach into this. That's kind of a given with this palette, but sometimes I'm just not really in the mood for these warm orangey tones. The shades do perform really nicely. I do enjoy it for that. I specifically love this cashmere shade. I love those really light, a little bit creamsicle orange shades. I think those are super cute, but it's just not one that I reach for every day just because I'm not reaching for warm tones every day, if that makes sense. This does get a lot of use from me in the fall though, because I feel like this is a very fall themed palette in my personal opinion. But yeah, there are just other palettes that I reach for more than this on an everyday basis, but I do still really love this palette. So next up we have the Milani Soft and Sultry palette. This one also has super reflective packaging. This one ranked a little bit higher than the than the Tartelette Toasted palette, just because I feel like I'm more likely to wear these kind of more neutrally cool tones than the warm tones on a daily basis. And this is also one that I take with me when I travel. Not that I've been doing that much lately, but this is kind of my perfect travel palette, just with the more neutral shades. The reason it isn't ranked up any higher is just because, similar to the Tartelette Toasted, you have to want like a very basic neutral look out of it. And while I do like to do neutral looks on a daily basis, sometimes this is just a little bit too neutral. I like to have that perfect balance in my palettes between neutral and colorful shades just to get that fun variety. This is a really nice palette. I like the performance of the shades in here. It's just, I like some of my other palettes more, but this is still a very good one. Alright, number 15 is the Nomad by Juvia's Place. So this is kind of my perfect fall palette. I know I said that with the Tartelette Toasted as well, but this one is probably the one in my palette that just really screams fall, and I really love it for that time of year. I sometimes reach for it during the rest of the year, but this is mostly a palette that I reach for during the fall, which is why it is only at number 15. But I know a lot of people have this palette and they just rave about this center shade, and I can see why. It is so beautiful. It's just like a perfect lid shade, and the overall color story of this palette is super cute. I've created some really pretty looks with this palette, but like I said, it's one that I just tend to reach for more in the fall time rather than year round. Number 14 is another Wet n Wild palette. This is my Wet n Wild Stop Playing Safe 10-pan palette. This one is my newest Wet n Wild palette in my collection. I just got it for Christmas in 2020, and I really love the color story in here. I think it's so cute. This is what I'm talking about when I say I want a mix of the neutrals and colorful shades, because you obviously have like this row of neutrals, but then you have some more fun pops of color to play with and experiment with, and I just really think that's a really nice, one, beginner-friendly way to do it, and it just provides a lot more options within palettes to have that nice mix. So that is why I like this palette. The reason it isn't ranked up higher is just purely because I like my other palettes a little bit more, but this is still a really good palette, and for only like $5 or $6, I'm very pleased. Number 13 goes to my last I Heart Revolution in Disney palette. This is the Princess and the Frog palette. So here is what this one looks like on the inside. So the reason this one is the highest out of the 3 little storybook Disney palettes from this brand is mostly because of these top 9 shades right here. I absolutely adore them. These shades down here are really pretty too, but I just love the greens up here, and I didn't really expect to love this palette as much as I do, and it was kind of a surprising one to me, but I am pleasantly surprised. I think it is a beautiful palette. I think the performance of this one is the best out of the 3, and yeah, I just really love this palette. I think it's so pretty, so cute. They're just, once again, other palettes that I just prefer a little bit more in my collection. Alright, number 12 goes to my Rude Cosmetics Roaring 20s Reckless palette. So, once again, love the packaging, love the theme of this. And then you open it up, and here are these shades in here. These are a little bit more grungy jewel toned shades in here, and you do get like a few more neutral shades that I could use every day, but then you just get these fun pops of color that it just makes me really excited to play with it. But I do overall really like the color story of this. So at number 11 is my newest palette. This is the Vibella Cosmetics Daisy Days palette. So here is what we are looking like on the inside. This one has the potential to move up in the ranking, but since it is new and I've only used it a few times, I just wanted to rank it just at number 11. I do really enjoy the shades in here, specifically like these fun little pops of color that you get. I think it's so cute. This is another one that shows a good example of the mix between neutrals and then the pops of color. The one little downside I have to this are these 2 shades are pressed glitters, which I don't particularly enjoy. As far as pressed glitters go, they are really nice, but I just wish they were just regular shimmers, but not much I can do about that. As far as the palette goes, I do really enjoy it though, and I just think it is really cute, but since it is new and I haven't fully tested it out, I did want to only rank it at number 11. Alright, next up we are moving into my top 10. So, like I said, I already did film my top 10 video, but it has changed a little bit. You will see if you watch that video already. So we're just going to go with what it is now. And like I said in that video, my ranking can change daily. It just kind of depends on what my preferences are at that moment. So yeah, so number 10 is my last Rude Cosmetics Roaring 20s palette. This is the Carefree palette. And this is obviously the most neutral out of the three, but I just really love the purple tones in here. The reason this isn't ranked up any higher is just the formula of these shades isn't the best. There are other formulas that I prefer to this one, but overall they do perform nicely. And I just really love the tones in here. Like on the level right here, this type of purple, matte purple shade is one of my favorites to use on my eyes. I really love purple tones, especially these kind of more cool tone purples. I think they're so pretty. So this one is number 10. Number 9 goes to my last Wet n Wild palette. This is the Wet n Wild Rosé in the Air palette. As you can see, this palette has gotten a lot of love from me. I have hit pan in 5 of the shades, and I'm very close to a couple more of the shades. I really love the color story of this. This is a dupe for the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette, which I do also have that as well. Little spoiler. But this one I really do like. There are just other palettes that I kind of prefer to this one. These top 10 are very difficult, so this changes all the time, but I do really enjoy this palette. I think it is a really good, affordable option. Number 8 goes to my Shared Planet Tiger palette. So here is what this one looks like on the inside. Once again, we have super reflective packaging. I think the color story of this is really cute. You got some nice warm tones in here. I just really love the theme of this palette, and I do like the color story. It's just, there are other ones that I like a little bit more. That's gonna kind of be a theme now that we're at my top palettes. It's just kind of what ones inspire me the most, what ones I like the color story from the most. None of these are bad palettes. I absolutely adore all of them. But yeah, it's just kind of the order that I decided to put them in today. Next up, number 7, we have my Anastasia Beverly Hills Soft Glam palette. So this one moved up from my ranking, my last ranking video. I really do enjoy the color story of this. It's a nice neutral option, and the formula of this is really what stands out. I really enjoy the formula in this palette. That's kind of why it is higher in this video. It's obviously, like the name of the palette says, it's a nice soft glam palette, and it works really nicely for that, so that is why it is up higher. Next up, we have my Ulta Beauty and Ravenclaw palette. This is the last Harry Potter palette from this collection, and definitely my favorite. I love the more neutral shades that you get here, but then you also get these fun pops of blue in here. And this palette is just one that I really, really love. And I'm going kind of quick through these top 10 just because I have already talked about them in the other video. So I'm kind of just showing you all quickly what order they are in now. Number 5 goes to my Glitter Realm A Whole New World palette. So here is what this one looks like on the inside. This is a color story that really just constantly inspires me, and I really love it because you have your more neutral shades, and I really love Riff Raff and Raja right here. But then you have some more colorful shades, obviously, to play around with and experiment with, and it's just one that I've created such a wide variety of looks with it, and I love every single look that comes out of it. Number 4 goes to my e.l.f. Retro Paradise palette. This one is so cute. I love the mix of neutrals and shimmers once again, or neutrals and colorful shades, I should say, because like this half is kind of the more neutral side, and then you have more colorful shades over here, and I think it is a really cute mix, and the formula is pretty nice. It's not the best, but for a drugstore palette, I think it performs nicely, and once again, the color story of this is just really cute in my opinion. Alright, top 3. I'm going to go through these kind of fast. Like I said, I've talked about all these in the previous video. So this is the Colourpop Midnight Masquerade palette. Love the packaging of it. And here are what these shades look like. I really love the color story of this. Like I probably mentioned in my last video, I don't really like the pressed glitters, but not much I can do about that. Overall, just really love the theme of this. The color story is really cute. And yeah, I'm a huge Disney fan, so these ones rank higher. And number 2 is the other Colourpop and Disney palette that I have. This is the It's a Princess Thing palette. This is my favorite packaging out of any palette that I own. And here's what the color story of this one looks like. So I just like this one slightly more than the Midnight Masquerade, even though this one does have less mattes. But I just feel like the more neutral shades in this one really speak to me more. And the shimmers in here are very, very beautiful and reflective, and I just really love it for that reason. And once again, the Disney theme is just something I really love. And finally, number 1, still the same as last time. This is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette, and I adore the color story in here. This is like my ideal color story, I feel like, because you have the more purpley shades. Like I said, I love purple tones like this, but you also get the more neutral shades as well, and I just love this palette. I just can't say enough about this palette. It is definitely my favorite in my collection. So that concludes my ranking video. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you stuck around till the end, I really appreciate it. And I would appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up and also subscribed, and let me know what else you would like to see from me now that you have seen all of my palettes. If there's one that you want a video on, please, please, please let me know, and I would be happy to do that. And with that, I will see you all in my next video. Bye!